Hello again, book lovers. I picked up a copy of How to Think Straight by Professor Antony Flew, because he used to be the head of department when I was studying at Reading University, and I probably should have read it. Its other title was Thinking About Thinking, which I kind of prefer, and it's intended as an introduction to analytical thought, logic, and it comes in at less than 150 pages, so it's a real skim through, and I found it very entertaining. Each paragraph is numbered, and then you get sub-paragraphs in the manner of Wittgenstein's work, or, dare I say it, and Professor Flew wouldn't like this at all, the Bible, so you can refer back to previous arguments. I found it a little bit bitty at the beginning, to be honest, where he sets out the tools of logic and analysis. We move on to analyses of if-then and all-none statements, ways that people can falsify statements, the importance of being precise with language, the penultimate chapter being a chapter of errors, one of my favourite subjects. After all, that's what philosophy is, isn't it? Trying to find the errors in arguments, and ending up with a defence of logic and reason. For those of you that don't know Professor Flew, he was a convinced atheist for 90% of his life, but converted soon before dying. That's another story, and he wrote a book about that, which I'd be interested to read. So to sum up, it's a kind of handbook for the budding philosopher. And entertaining, I said, because there are some quite witty little turns of phrase and quotations. I enjoyed the analysis of the sorites, as the Greeks called it, the problem of the heap. How many grains of sand do you put on a table before it becomes a heap? And the impossibility of finding that kind of liquid separation mark. This is a tactic which Flew rejects quite happily and points out some of its abuses. And as an example of some of the little humorous grace notes, he brings a quote from Edmund Burke to bear on this one. Though no man can draw a stroke between the confines of night and day, still light and darkness are on the whole tolerably distinguishable. Nice little bit of British sarcasm there. And examples are given so that we can tease out the arguments in real life. And this is where I found it interesting, because this was written, well, it was published in 1998, yet it seems to deal with quite modern topics, such as the gender pay gap and racial inequality, giving some nice concrete examples, but some of them I would take issue with, so that would be an interesting idea to resuscitate the professor and say, hey, I didn't quite follow your logic in that argument. A right-wing thinker, I think we could safely say. He's very suspicious of a lot of the modern movements. And I say modern as if they were modern 30 years ago. It seems that they're continuing to be modern. Orwell is brought to bear on the chapter about clarification of language, which, in passing, I'll say was something that stuck in my head from the beginning. Let's first agree what we're arguing about. So here's Orwell in Politics in the English Language. People are imprisoned for years without trial, or shot in the back of the neck, or sent to die of scurvy in Arctic lumber camps. This is called, quote, elimination of unreliable elements, quote. The inflated style is itself a kind of euphemism. A mass of Latin words falls upon the facts like soft snow, etc., etc. Gives you a nice idea of the kind of thought which is plucked to serve Professor Flew's arguments. It's a book that you will pause at if you're following the arguments and you're not familiar with them. And even if you are, might as well check. One of his pet bugbears seems to be people who produce multi-page academic documents backing up some public strategy or other without any kind of evidence as to how these things have worked in the past, or any kind of metric with which we'll be able to measure these things in the future. So if these kinds of things exercise your mind, and you will find them everywhere when you start thinking like a philosopher, you can't even read a paragraph of the newspaper without challenging something. If you want to do that, you could read this and it will give you some tools to do it with. I personally find it amusing.